Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to Running on Renewables, New York's Race to Clean Energy. We are going to get started in just 1 minute here so that we can give everyone an opportunity to join us and get settled in. My name is Ann Reynolds, and I am the Executive Director of the Alliance for Clean Energy New York. And in case you're not familiar with ACE New York, we are a membership organization, and our members are environmental groups and companies that work on developing land-based wind and offshore wind, community solar and grid-scale solar projects, and energy storage or fuel cell projects. We have member companies engaged in transmission, energy efficiency, electric vehicle manufacturing, and electric vehicle charging, and hydroelectric power. We also have members that are consultants and suppliers to the clean energy companies, some labor organizations, and some educational organizations as members. So first up, before we get started, there is a short video from ACE New York for you to take a look at. At least I think there is.
A new era is upon us, and New Yorkers are leading the way forward. Resilient, innovative, and smart. Ingenuity and collaboration, creating a better life for all New Yorkers. Expanding structures, growing prospects. The dawn's light shows us. The ocean's breeze lifts us. The current's strength propels us, strengthening our society, healing our woodlands and natural resources, the source of our collective strength within each one of us.
Thank you so much for that. So I wanted to mention that we selected Running on Renewables, New York's Race to Clean Energy as the conference theme because it's the best description of what's going on in New York right now. And in New York's climate law, there is a mandate for 70% renewable electricity by 2030, just 9 years from now, and 100% emissions-free electricity just 10 years later. But given how long it takes to develop, permit, interconnect, and build offshore wind, land-based wind, and solar, this timeline means we need to have all the necessary renewable energy for 2030 under contract in 2026. And lots of projects should be under construction right now. Luckily, there are several projects under construction right now. New York's climate law also requires ambitious economy-wide carbon reductions. But taking the transportation sector as an example, the timeline is tough. Vehicles bought tomorrow will be on the roads for 10 years or more, especially heavy duty and farm vehicles. So to reach the goals for transportation, we must ramp up the sales of electric vehicles very quickly, starting yesterday. And this race against time has become very obvious in the recent deliberations of New York's Climate Action Council, of which I am honored to be a member. In the last year, the Climate Action Council has had at least 40 hours of meetings, and the 8 advisory panels met much more frequency, as did the state staff. And this process itself is a race because the law requires the draft scoping plan to be done this calendar year. But it also will be a race to implement the plan. In the late spring, the panels all submitted long lists of consensus-based recommendations about how New York can make it to our climate goals. In my opinion, none of the panels came back to the council with half measures. The power generation panel recommended we build enough renewable electricity to reach 100% emissions-free by 2040, as the law requires. The transportation panel recommended we phase out the sale of all motor vehicles that use gasoline, and the efficiency and buildings panel recommended that all new construction be electric and that all new appliances be electric over time. As the next step, The state took all of these recommendations, which were significant and impactful recommendations, and they modeled the initial results, referred to as the integration analysis. Unfortunately, the initial results were that New York State did not meet the emissions mandates in the law. We didn't make it. We had to go back to the drawing board. And really, since the recommendations already phased out most uses of fossil fuels, with some exceptions like aviation, one of the only variables left was time. By accelerating some of the recommendations, the model did produce emissions levels that meet the mandates in the law. But when you accelerate these major shifts in energy generation and energy use, it does become even more challenging, of course, because you have less time. And I'm not relaying this to bring you down or to delve deeply into the many detailed recommendations that are now in front of the Climate Action Council, but I'm relaying it to illustrate that we are in a race against time. And it's a race to save the planet, to protect ourselves from worse effects of climate change, worse even than we have seen this year through the fires in California, the hurricanes in Louisiana, and the flooding in New York subways and basement apartments. And that's just in the United States, forgetting the devastating impacts around the globe. But it is a race that New York State is in. We are in this race, and that's good news. We are running it now, not just talking about it. Earlier this year, New York announced new contracts for 21 solar projects. And with these awards, it brought to total 94 projects that now have long-term contracts awarded in recent years. And if all of those get built, that would be enough to meet half of New York's 2030 power demand. That's if we also meet our efficiency standards, for example. Even with all of those ifs, it's major progress. Then for Earth Day 2021, New York's next solicitation for grid scale renewables was launched, and it was the biggest ever, 4.5 million megawatt hours. I can't wait to hear the long list of projects that win contracts this year. But we've talked before about the struggles to get projects from contracts to operation. It still isn't easy, but I'm more optimistic after some developments in New York this year. We have the new Office of Renewable Energy Siting. They have a new permitting process. They issued their first 2 permits, and there's now 14 projects that have permits through the Article 10 process that preceded it. And so we think there's about 20 large-scale projects under construction this year, and that's just the grid scale projects. There's numerous community solar projects. In fact, the state was making such good progress on our distributed renewables goal that they felt comfortable upping it to 10,000 megawatts in an announcement during Climate Week this year made by Governor Hochul. So this is all good signs of progress. We are in this race. Reaching the finish line depends on offshore wind power too. We have 5 projects that have contracts. That's great news, but it would have stopped there if the federal government hadn't been able to come in and designate a new offshore wind energy area off the coast of New York. And that step now opens the door to a new lease auction and then a next solicitation in New York State in 2022. Also good progress. But in other sectors like buildings and transportation, in my view, New York is way behind in this race, but we have started. That's key. Another great Climate Week announcement from Governor Hochul was signing into law the zero emissions vehicle legislation that passed this year and issuing draft rules for heavy duty vehicles. These are big steps forward. The fact is we know how to tackle transportation pollution, but we have a gap in how to pay for it. That's why ACE, for example, supports the Transportation Climate Initiative, which is a multi-state effort that New York State should join. In that electrification race, there's also bills that the legislature should consider this year that ACE will be working on, bills to incentivize the use of electric school buses for public schools, bills to address building codes and appliance efficiency standards, and bills to allow EV companies to sell their electric vehicles in new retail stores in New York, which isn't allowed now. So you will be hearing about all of these measures and more in our conference today. I'm so pleased to have Mr. David Hayes from the White House to address us with some updates from the federal perspective. And we have Commissioner Howard and President Harris from the Public Service Commission and NYSERDA to update us. We have our own Amanda Lefton, now at the helm of the U.S. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, to fill us in on their offshore wind activities, activities that are so crucial to our offshore wind progress here in New York State. I'm glad New York is committed to this race, and I'm glad so many companies are committed to investing in New York to help us win it. We need to foster a state where clean energy companies, from electric bus manufacturers to hydrogen fuel cell companies to offshore wind, land-based wind, solar, and battery companies, can come to our state and invest. They can get projects built, and they can gradually displace the need for fossil fuel generators, and in so doing, provide cleaner air, carbon-free power, a more resilient state, and a safer future. But we also want this to happen in a way that provides jobs for New Yorkers, innovation for New York universities, and a better life for New York's communities, especially disadvantaged communities. New York has the potential to show the world what it would be like if we were all running on renewables. And so I sincerely hope that our dialogue today during the conference can both teach us and motivate us all to keep racing. With that, I was going to show one additional video from our sponsor, one of our sponsors. And we do also thank all of our sponsors, which we will be highlighting during the conference today. So if we could go ahead and show the next video, please. Thank you for that. So we have a bit of a change to our program, as usual, last minute changes where we're swapping a few speakers. So I'm very pleased to introduce Mr. David Hayes, who is Special Assistant to the President for Climate Policy. So if any of you have been following the news, you know that he's busy. He's a senior member of National Climate Advisor Gina McCarthy's White House team, which is now advancing the Biden administration's climate, conservation, and clean energy priorities. And before that, he was executive director of the State Energy and Environmental Impact Center at the NYU School of Law, where he worked with state attorneys general on climate, environmental, and clean energy initiatives. And he previously served as deputy secretary and CEO at the US Department of the Interior for Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. He was a climate policy advisor for the Biden-Harris transition team and led the Energy and Environmental Agency review teams for the Obama-Biden transition in 2008. He's a former distinguished visiting lecturer at Stanford Law School, a former fellow at Stanford University's Precourt Institute for Energy and Woods Institute for the Environment, and former chairman of the board of the Environmental Law Institute. He's a graduate of the University of Notre Dame and Stanford Law School. And I can't tell you how pleased we are to have you join us this morning, knowing how busy you are. And so I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Anne. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. Thanks for juggling the schedule. Here's why. This morning at 8:45 on the White House website, there's a very important announcement by the president that he's moving forward with his Build Back Better framework. So I'm going to talk about that this morning. I'm throwing my usual notes out. But first, let me say that as a native of Rochester, New York, I'm particularly pleased to be talking to this group. And also as the beneficiary of many of the alumni from New York that are here in the White House, I'm grateful for the leadership that New York has been showing, in particular for the past few years. Ali Zaidi, of course, is the Deputy Climate Advisor to the President, and with Gina McCarthy runs the Climate Policy Office, of which I'm a part. Also, John Rhodes from PUC land and NYSERDA land is now a couple of offices from me as the other special assistant to the president on climate policy. And of course, Amanda Lefton, the aforementioned. I talk to every week, almost every day sometimes, as I coordinate from the White House the whole of government effort that we have underway on the offshore wind side. First of all, congratulations for everything New York is doing and has done. As we prepare for the COP next week in Glasgow, it's really remarkable that the efforts of states like New York, California, and Massachusetts have enabled us to work through the last 4 years of lack of federal leadership and make progress on clean energy, thanks to you. But now I'm happy to say, as you know, the federal government is in the game big. The announcement this morning is that from the president, you can find it on the White House website, is that he's identified, based on all the discussions that have occurred in recent weeks, a framework for his Build Back Better plan that he is confident now both houses of Congress will pass and he will sign into law. And he's calling on Congress to take up this bill, the Build Back Better Act, along with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed by the Senate several months ago, and sign both into law. Now, you know what's in the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed, but I want to remind you for a minute of how much climate is in that $1 trillion bill that was passed on a bipartisan basis. And then I want to talk a little bit more specifically about what's in now the reconciliation bill, which we're calling now the Build Back Better Act. First, back on that infrastructure legislation that was passed in a bipartisan way. In terms of clean energy, let's start with transit. It would make the largest federal investment in public transit in history. Almost $40 billion in public transit. We know that that's good for the environment, particularly as it electrifies, and already much of it is electric. But in that regard, 35,000, there's money for 35,000 electric school buses nationwide, another transit investment. And there's $15 billion approximately in EV charging infrastructure that's in that bipartisan framework bill that passed the Senate. Then you go to infrastructure near airports, ports, and waterways, where there are tremendous environmental justice issues associated with the use of diesel and other oil and gas combustible products. There $17 billion in that bipartisan package would drive electrification and other low carbon technologies in those areas, supporting sustainable new infrastructure. You know how important that is in New York. Also, sort of hidden in that bipartisan bill was some methane restrictions. In particular, how? By plugging the literally hundreds of thousands of abandoned oil and gas wells and abandoned coal mines that are continuing to burp methane every day into the environment. Over $20 billion would be spent on these kinds of historic legacy pollution problems that are continuing to create climate change. And huge investment in transmission, which you in New York know as much as anybody, that if you don't have the transmission grid right, you can't make this happen. And that bipartisan infrastructure bill had several $billion and new authority given to the Department of Energy to create a grid deployment authority that would do planning at the federal level that's never been done before and promote interregional transmission and provide new funding sources to make it happen. Plus, there's an enormous amount of money in the infrastructure, bipartisan infrastructure bill to deal with the resilience problem, the climate impact problem that is so significant. $50 billion to deal with implications of the droughts, the heat waves, the wildfires, et cetera. So just remember that. Now let's talk about what's in the reconciliation bill that the president, after negotiations, has agreed is the right bill that will pass the Congress. It's $1.7 trillion. And the climate piece of it is $555 billion. What's the biggest driver there? It's tax credits. $320 billion of tax credits. Direct pay over 10 years, clean electricity, and transmission. This is transformative. This will bring in the business sector like it's never been brought in before. Then you move to an incredible array of industrial decarbonization incentives, including loans and grants in the billions of dollars, more money for transmission, money for auto manufacturing in grants and loans to, again, facilitate the electrification of the industry. And at the consumer level, an amazing array of financing opportunities, including money for home efficiency and electrification, cutting rooftop solar costs by up to 30% for individuals, providing incentives for heat pumps, providing electric vehicle consumer tax credits of up to $12,500 per vehicle for American-made, union-made vehicles, electric vehicles. Cutting these consumer rebates are projected to cut family energy costs by $500 a year per family. Two more quick things. Green procurement. The president early on promised to use the muscle of the federal procurement policy to pull green energy into the mainstream. $20 billion in this program is devoted to doing just that, to buying clean materials, to dealing with long-term storage, pull forward new technologies that will accelerate the transition to clean energy. There is $19 billion for a civilian climate corps, bringing diverse youth into the climate movement, giving them jobs, putting them on path for good paying union jobs, and having them help from stem to stern in urban areas and rural to advance climate interests. And finally, throughout this piece of legislation, environmental justice and equity are strong. There are billions of dollars, literally, in providing neighborhood access and equity grants, in dealing with problem areas like shipping and ports and helping them electrify, and creating a huge clean energy and sustainability accelerator, a green bank approach that is geared toward folks that are doing small projects in urban areas that have been left behind in some of the big moves on climate change. This is one of the most exciting aspects of the legislation. So the time is now to take a look at this, to help get it passed, to tell everybody about it. So very excited. Sorry to disrupt the order here this morning, and I appreciate the chance to tell you as one of the first audiences to hear this excellent news.
Thank you so much. I have to say, you're speaking my language. That's all, each thing you listed off, I was like, yes, we need that in New York. Yes, we need that in New York. So that is really exciting. But more importantly, I think you have a meeting with Gina and you have to get that all done. So thank you so much for joining us and for for spreading this good news, and we wish you all the best in what's going to happen in the next few weeks.
Thank you so much, Ann. Congratulations on a fabulous conference here, and appreciate the chance to be with you this morning.
Thank you. So that was exciting. I'm just thinking about all the things that New York could do with all those great incentives and how that will help us meet what we're writing into our climate action plan right now. But we have to keep moving. I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Julie Tai, who's the president of the League of Conservation Voters here in New York State. And she is going to introduce our next speaker.
First of all, I am just so excited that we were able to, talk about good timing, Anne. Sometimes that works out, right? But certainly we at NYLCV and the entire League of Conservation Voter movement across the country are really excited about the President Biden's announcement this morning about the Build Back Better Act agreement and all the, the record-breaking investments that the federal government is going to be making in clean energy, something that we in New York have long been leaders on. So very exciting to follow that, and I was happy to see the opening spot to that. It is my pleasure now to introduce my friend, Commissioner John Howard. In 2019, he was appointed as Commissioner of the New York State Public Service Commission. He brings more than 37 years of New York State service to that position. He started out at the New York Power Authority, where he was responsible for monitoring relevant activities at FERC, at DEC, and at the Commission. He served as Executive Deputy Director at the New York State Consumer Protection Board, where he oversaw the board's utility intervention filings to the Commission, to FERC, and to the FCC. While serving as Executive Director for our friend Paul Tonko, at the time Chair of the Assembly Energy Committee and our neighbor right across the hall, John developed and led the Chairman's program in energy policy and legislation, including low-cost energy programs, electric deregulation, authority reform, and energy taxes. Mr. Howard also served as Deputy Chief of Staff to then Attorney General Andrew Cuomo, where he developed and oversaw implementation of the Attorney General's Community Partnership Initiative. From 2011, he served as Director of Chamber Operations to the Governor, where he was responsible for the execution of public appearances across the state. And truly, I know very few people in government service who have been to as many parts of New York State as John Howard has in his tenure here. With all of this experience, he has truly seen it all, and Commissioner Howard brings a wealth of knowledge to the topic of New York's race to clean energy. So we look forward to his remarks this morning. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Ann, and thanks for this opportunity. This one really gave me a lot of pause. It is an exciting time. It is a vital time for our state, our nation, and the planet. But again, it is, with that excitement comes risk, and without great risk, we will not get great rewards. So thank you. So that's what sort of be the themes of sort of what I'm going to talk about today. Sort of outline the role of the Public Service Commission and how we deal with climate investments, and just in the role of the commission in general. First, we are the body that decides how much utilities can charge from the distribution and sale of energy across our state. I believe the commission historically has done a very good job of keeping those costs low and making sure that ratepayers are treated fairly. But we also have another role. We have to approve all bill-based expenses regarding certainly climate-related things. First, we approve the RECs. Then we approve the ZECs. We approve the ORECs. We approve transmission-related cost. We also do new enhanced distribution-related cost. At the end of the day, we decide who pays and how much. Would it were I was on the other side of the ledger where I could just give out the money as opposed to just collect the money. We have an extraordinary responsibility ahead of us. So the task at hand is recapitalizing our state's energy system in roughly 20 years. No one has ever tried that before, anywhere on the planet. That includes decarbonizing our electric generation system. eliminating fossil fuels for transportation, buildings, and industrial uses, possibly doubling the throughput of our transmission and distribution system to electrify our economy. All of this while maintaining one of the most reliable electric grids on the planet. So knowing the mandate is easy. Doing it and actually paying for it is not just hard, but nearly unprecedented in human endeavor. And for those who have been paying attention to my remarks as being on the commission, they've heard me say from multiple times now, paying for this transmission solely through customers will be impossible, unfair, and will set the entire movement backwards. High retail energy prices have been the political third rail in the Western politics for decades, and New York is no exception. Just look at the rhetoric surrounding the current increase in fossil prices and their related costs to consumers. And with over $2 billion in arrears for electric and gas utilities at this moment, with these projected price increases, we will only see this current problem being exacerbated. So what should we do? The good news is we hope, my friend, is demand from Congress, significant funding available for climate-related investments. Today's news was quite encouraging. However, I have unfortunately been disappointed in this space for the last few months. And the next few weeks will be very critical. So as up till today, my hope was dwindling, but maybe today my hope has been rekindled. My second point will be, we must be cautious about our go-it-alone strategies. New York cannot do this alone. We cannot solve the global climate crisis all by ourselves. Our statewide economic competitiveness is truly at stake. Either we're in this all together as a nation, as a planet, or those that go first will see some real short-term and possibly medium-term real economic disadvantages. Number three, we need to be 100% transparent with New Yorkers on the costs associated with decarbonization of our economy. Failure to do this will only result in pushbacks and, again, could jeopardize the entire effort. This is going to be enormously expensive. So having people knowing what that is and identifying how we pay for it equitably will be critical. The fourth thing is we have to demand a very high percentage of the hardware that we are going to use for this energy transition be manufactured in New York State, from transmission towers to offshore wind turbines. If New York State ratepayers are subsidizing the cost, we must get the most for our economy. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to tour the Transco construction in Columbia County. Terrific stuff. Doing a bang-up job with New York workers and at pace and maybe even a little ahead of schedule. However, one thing was enormously disturbing. Every one of the towers for that project come in shipping containers from China. And all the conductor comes from India. There is no domestic source for any of the transformer or other related equipment. Again, we're doing a great job putting it together, but we need to build the Legos, not just put them together. Number five, we have to avoid creating a windfall for new property taxes as a result of major capital investments by utilities. The issue of property taxes on utility ratepayers has been one of my causes before I even got to the commission. People in New York City pay nearly a quarter of their bill to local taxes in New York City, not for the providing energy or distributing it to their homes. It is a pure tax grab. And last year, the legislature helped provide some guidance to municipalities on how we tax large renewable projects by encouraging payment in lieu of taxes agreements, which greatly reduces the all-for-all cost of those projects and their cost to ratepayers. A new and less expensive system needs to be implemented, particularly in New York City, so utility customers don't have to pay inflated bills driven by an unfair and out-of-date real property tax system. So those are where I think my lines in the sand, but I also have a bunch of sort of more existential questions that we need to answer. And quite honestly, I don't have the answers. Hopefully groups like this will help doing this. The first question today is, when will we be able to shut off the last fossil units in New York State? I said before, reliability is an absolute. Any system-wide failures like those that occurred in Texas or in various times in California are wholly unacceptable to us. It's not a question of how we're going to get someplace. It's a question of how long do we make the transition, and doing it quickly and prematurely. And I guarantee you, one Texas style outage, particularly in the city of New York, will again set our entire movement backwards. Another question, when will long-term storage close to load be ready? In most scenarios, we'll require it, but no agreement on a solution is close at hand. I understand that the president's bill, and that we hope there will be more R&D for these issues. But again, long-term storage close to load is something that will be absolutely necessary in our world of renewables with some degree of interruptions. This is another question. How will we deal with the potential stranded assets of the natural gas system? Billions of dollars are at stake in New York State. And we have not come to grips with how that transition is done. This is utility shareholders and debt holders still have property rights in this state. And that concept of rapid depreciation will only exacerbate the cost to customers in the near term. It is a struggle that we will have to deal with. The question is, when do we start taking things away from people? First will be natural gas hookups. When will that happen? Next will be fossil-based appliance replacements, furnaces, stoves, ranges, hot water heaters. When will that happen? When will petroleum-based transportation be ended? And then when will commercial aircraft transportation need to be curtailed in order to meet climate goals? I wish I had the answers that could satisfy me on those questions, but as of now, I think they remain very elusive. You know, in 2022, our bills really start coming due for paying for our climate commitments. Several which I anticipate will be coming before the commission next year. You know, protecting ratepayers will continue to be my laser-like focus, and transparency will be the watchword as our deliberations move forward. We have 4 words that we rely on here at the commission: safe and reliable, just and reasonable. So thank you for letting me share a few thoughts, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. And one thing that is somewhat moving back to a mere mortal on the commission as opposed to chairman has a degree of liberation associated with it. So I feel maybe being a little more candid from going forward.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Howard. I mean, I would express your theme of your remarks as making it real, right?
Yeah. Again, hopes and aspirations. You know, I also spent nearly 20 years of my career in the state legislature. I know what it's like to promise things 10 years in the future. Tax cuts, school aid, you name it. But then every year we have to grind through the budget and reality hits us in the kisser. So again, we have never promised so much on such a level before. Again, if there was some place on the planet we could even point to today that it makes sense and they're doing a great job. Everybody, and I know I've read a fair amount of stuff about Norway, maybe the first truly electrified Western country. But what we don't talk about is they paid for it through oil and gas revenues and will continue to pump oil and gas even as they move to a totally decarbonized local economy. So those sort of things just don't disappear.
Right. I was going to ask a question about how you started out your remarks saying that we should not do this solely on the backs of ratepayers. So we do pay for a lot of our climate and energy transition incentives now through ratepayer charges.
And I can step you there almost exclusively.
Yeah. So my question is, what should we do to diversify that? I mean, the first one is federal money. We heard a little bit about that, but any
Correct.
ideas you have?
You know, one of the things I have been, well, first of all, the first thing is to do it as exclusively as New York-based revenue will be a big mistake. It's not like we're a low-cost tax state, okay? And we have, to quote the former governor, we cannot move New York State forward as the tax capital of the nation. So there's some other things. I have been now more persuaded, Ann, it's not in the president's proposal, but a nationwide carbon tax would seem to be appropriate. And that revenue given specifically for climate-related expenditures. And in that same vein is we are so far ahead of the rest of the country on our ambition. Well, just take transmission. We have more steel in the ground. We have several hundred miles of transmission under construction today. We are outpaced the next 5 states combined in terms of those investments. So we cannot be punished for being so bold and going so far so fast. I use the joke, it's going to be a long time before Indiana catches up. So we're going to need the money first.
Got it. The federal money.
The federal money and I think some new creative revenue enhancements, particularly dealing with carbon, might be appropriate because it does a couple things. They've been, particularly on the fossil side, the generating side, they've been anxious to do this. It actually, in the near term, I think benefits them, a straight up carbon pricing. But I think it's not I'm for taxes, Ann, but I'm for taxes that are fair and equitable. And a nationwide carbon tax dedicated to climate related expenses would seem to be appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Thanks. On that tax question, I'm intrigued by your remarks about property taxes, and I've spent more time thinking about property taxes this year than I wanted to because of the effort in New York to standardize taxation on wind and solar projects. It's been tough. It's a tough cultural change. Anything else you want to say about that?
Well, I think there are a couple places in New York State, New York City, and Nassau County, because they're two areas with a special utility franchise tax, which quite honestly is usury. For instance, there is one water utility in Nassau County, in Nassau County, that 51% of every dollar collected from water customers goes to real property taxes. Okay. Roughly 20+% of every dollar Con Ed ratepayers pay goes to property taxes. Again, we know that between Con Ed themselves and other, particularly on the offshore integration of transmission, will add billions of dollars of new tax base to that, to New York City in particular. And if 20% of every dollar of that new investment has to go to real property taxes, what have we accomplished? The other thing is there's this misnomer, particularly among legislators and other people in the political world. They think that the utilities pay those taxes. No, they don't. You and I pay those taxes. It's just a hidden mechanism for collecting local revenues. And I think the state has done a great job broadly on real property tax reform, but I think this is one of the big undone parts of it going forward. And I'm hopeful that the legislature in their wisdom will do the right thing.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'll be spending a lot of time on in the next year too. My last question is about the manufacturing here in New York State. You know, I'm a Schenectady girl. I share your interest in getting some of these supply chain jobs in New York. There was a proposal in the legislature last year. It didn't move, but it said no offshore wind turbines in New York that can be used in projects in New York that aren't manufactured in New York. And much as we love the sentiment of that, we know there's no offshore wind turbines manufactured in New York. So not that it passed.
Quite honestly, there are no offshore wind turbines manufactured in the United States of America.
Yeah,
currently. And what we view as manufacture needs to be delved in very closely. I think we need the high value added manufacture, particularly assembling nacelles. While it sounds very sexy, and it's largely doing components assembly from around the world. And again, we don't make the components, we just bolt them together here. However, I read with great interest that putting us already behind the curve, that Siemens signed an agreement with the state of Virginia to build airfoils at a new facility in Newport News. Again, airfoils is something we also don't manufacture in New York or the United States, certainly not of the magnitude that we need. And airfoils could be a particularly important thing. We already, I believe, starting to do on structures for wind turbines right here in the Port of Albany. But again, that is just one component, but maximizing all of it. The other thing is the transmission investments. Again, we got to figure out a way in New York to actually get some of that business. And those are the kind of the incentives that we used to do. I grew up in Schenectady County too. So, there was a point where every transformer, they made wire. We can do that. We have a big wire industry in New York State. A lot of people don't realize that. But again, why can't we make conductor here? And by the way, it's worth the subsidy because we're already paying the subsidy because it's not free.
Yeah, I agree. Why not get the subsidy directed towards jobs for New Yorkers?
Correct. And again, you'll also hear me and we have done a good job on the issue of prevailing wage for the people doing the work. It's very terrific that our transmission initiatives right now are fully unionized. Living wage jobs are going up across New York State. That will need to continue. I believe, in my personal belief, that certain things, even as we get to distributed solar and as we go down the supply chain, that those same sort of provisions that we do for large scale projects be brought into local communities as well.
Well, Commissioner Howard, I think we're at the end of our time.
Well, exciting time. And by the way, start dialing your congressman over and over. My congressman, my hero, my former boss, Paul Tonko, is going to be leading the charge in this. He's going to need support, not only from his side of the aisle, but I think from across the aisle. And hopefully we can move a couple folks from the other side of the aisle into a win column for us.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting few weeks to see if we can get this or some version of this over the finish line. But when Mr. Hayes was speaking, it strikes me it's real money that would have an impact on us directly in New York and what we're trying to do.
And I think also it will be very, very helpful, but it will be a fraction of what we are going to spend. And again, that's why I think my goal, particularly as a member of the commission, is being 100% transparent on what these real costs need to be in the near and medium terms. So there we go.
Yep. Well, you've got your workout cut out.
Okay.
Thank you so much for
All
joining
right.
us today, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Oh, I'm sure. Bye-bye.
Take care. Okay, everyone, I am now going to turn it over to Kaylee Bankston. She's from Invenergy and is the chairperson of the ACE New York Board of Directors, who's going to introduce our next message.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Anne, and thank you so much for those remarks, Commissioner Howard, and for joining us today. And hello, everyone. What an exciting day for our industry, and it's really great to see so many people gathered on this virtual conference today. Like Anne said, I'm Kaylee Bankston. I am Senior Manager of Government and Regulatory Affairs at Invenergy, a leading developer of solar, wind, and transmission projects in New York State. And I am very privileged to be able to serve as the chair of the ACE New York Board of Directors. And the reason I am talking to you now is that I am here to introduce a special message from a person who really doesn't need much of an introduction, U.S. Senate Majority Leader and New York's very own Senator Chuck Schumer.
Hi, everyone. This is Senator Chuck Schumer, and I'm so honored to welcome all of you to the Alliance for Clean Energy New York's 15th annual conference. I'd like to commend ACE New York and its 103 member organizations for the fabulous work you do to advocate for policies that support the clean energy transition and help New York reach its climate action and clean energy goals. As many of you know, I've been working hard in Washington on bipartisan infrastructure bills that would help secure the clean energy future of New York, and we will accomplish even more in the Build Back Better agenda that we're working on right now. And I'm so proud to have such a strong ally in ACE New York and all of your partners, because it's so important to continue the hydroelectric, solar, and wind energy operations that New York already has. ACE New York is integral to showing that New York State can innovate, lead by example, and demonstrate to other states and countries how we can grow clean energy, jobs, and economic stability all at the same time. Together with ACE New York, we'll continue to work towards achieving our goals of improving air quality and keeping energy dollars in state, while demonstrating bold action on climate change. So congratulations on your 15th annual conference, and I look forward to working with every one of you to ensure a cleaner, greener New York.
Thanks, Kaylee, and thank you to Senator Schumer. Now, we also have another video for one of our sponsor organizations. Our friends at the New York Power Authority have sponsored our conference today, so we're going to have a short message from NYPA. Thank you for that. For those of you paying attention, I saw a cameo by our new Governor Hochul in the middle of that NYPA video. They're on top of things there. Okay, something I was supposed to do at the beginning was to recognize all of our sponsors. So we're going to put some information on screen to let you know who has generously supported the ACE New York conference today. We have gigawatt sponsors, several there. We also have megawatt sponsors. And there they are. And we have additional sponsors as well. We have support from NYSERDA and NYPA. We have some media sponsors, RTO Insider and Mountain Eagle Media. So we really do appreciate all their support for ACE's mission. And then before we go into our breakout sessions, we have one more video from a sponsoring organization, which is Rise, Light and Power, also a member of ACE New York. So we will show that now.
The best thing I loved about Rise, Light and Power, they opened up the door. They wanted to get involved.
They have been awesome in helping us feed our people in our community. Every week we get boxes of food, hundreds of people line up. I mean, it's such a blessing.
What's exciting now is that Rise, Light and Power is going to make it so that we have clean energy within our community.
It's real because it's our lives that's affected by it. It's not just publicity. This is real life. This is life and death situations that's going on.
Changing from carbon, petroleum-based power to green energy, I think is going to make enormous change for the health outcomes of the people in this community. My name is Chris Hanway.
My name is Claudia Koger.
My name is Bob Madison.
I'm Ann Cotton Morris.
My name is April Simpson, and together we will rise.
Okay, I'm now going to say a little bit about our concurrent sessions that we're going to have. So you will have two options, and one of them is on transportation emissions in New York. What is the plan? We have some great speakers that will delve into what exactly New York needs to do to reduce transportation emissions. And there's the speakers on screen for that. It'll be moderated by Adam Reuter of NYSERDA, who many of you know. And then our second breakout session is building wind and solar, making progress on permitting and taxation. This is a topic close to the hearts of many ACE New York members. It's what you're all struggling with to get projects built. And so that will be moderated by Kyle Rabin, and you see the speakers on screen. So those are your two options. Now, if you want to join one or the other, which we hope you do, you can go to the chat function and select that option by clicking on a link. There's one link for option 1A and one link for session 1B. You will be maybe prompted, depending on what version of Zoom you have, to say, do you want to leave this Zoom and join the other? In which case you say yes, if you get that question, and then you will find yourself in the breakout session. So folks can go ahead and do that now, and we'll be able to tell by virtue of who the participants are, how many of you are successfully jumping to the two sessions. I have to figure out which one I want to join because I do want to go to both. But for those of you interested in transportation, you should click on the link for session 1A. And if you want to go to the one on permitting and taxation and what progress New York has made on that this year, you should go to session 1B. Hi, folks. Welcome back. We are going to give it another minute or so to allow people to jump from the two breakout sessions back to this main conference session. So if you would just bear with me for another 30 seconds or so, I can tell that folks are joining right now. And then we will turn it over to our next speaker. Again, for those of you that are just joining back, we're going to wait a minute or two before we get started. And give folks the opportunity to join back from their individual breakout sessions, which I hope you enjoyed. I was tuning into the permitting and taxation breakout session, and it struck me how dense and complicated all that material is. There's a lot to learn. It's not easy to become a project developer. All right. I can see that folks are still joining from the breakout sessions, but I don't want us to get off track too much. So in just one more minute, we will get started. All right. Okay, this is Ann Reynolds from the Alliance for Clean Energy. Thank you so much for coming back to our general session here, although I can see that folks are still joining. We have a great next speaker, and I am going to turn it over to Damian Bednarz. He's with ENBW North America, but he is also a member of the New York Offshore Wind Alliance Steering Committee. So we work together all the time. Thank you for being here, Damian, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Ann. And it is a pleasure being here. As noted, I'm Damian Bednarz, Managing Director of ENBW North America. And I got a distinct pleasure here to introduce our next spotlight speaker. But before we get into our next speaker, we wanted to share a quick video from one of our members. And with that pump up tune, we're back. Again, Damian Bednarz with ENBW North America. I'm here to introduce our next speaker, Amanda Lefton, Director of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management with the U.S. Department of Interior with the Biden administration. For many of you, I'm sure Amanda doesn't require this introduction, but I do have this distinct pleasure to set this up. Let's start here. Amanda is the tip of the spear as it relates to deploying up to 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. Amanda's charged with the regulatory process of permitting, leasing, and managing the offshore wind assets of the United States. And in that, she is highly focused on deploying and developing offshore wind as a renewable resource going forward. But Amanda requires no introduction to New York State. She knows the state inside and out. She served as first Assistant Secretary for Energy and Environment for a New York governor, where she was charged with essentially managing the scope and mission of 12 agencies and was successfully pushing a lot of the ambitious legislative work and executive action on climate and clean energy work here in the state. She has been experienced all throughout the state, from environmental NGOs like the Nature Conservancy, the labor movement outside of Rochester, as well as in the legislative perspectives of the Assembly and the Senate. So with that, proper views here of Amanda and her role, she's going to get a chance to speak to you a little more about offshore wind and the amazing potential it has for this state. Thank you, Amanda.
Well, thank you, Damian. Good morning, Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm so pleased to be here today, and I'm grateful for the terrific team at the Alliance for Clean Energy New York for inviting me to speak at the 15th annual Fall Conference. So exciting. It's really wonderful to be speaking with New Yorkers. New York really continues to show remarkable leadership in advancing offshore wind. And in many ways, New York and other states have not only driven progress on offshore wind for many years, you all have sustained that effort that's allowed us to get to where we are today. And I'm not just saying that as a former New Yorker. That is really an important role that the state has played, and many of you have played in advancing offshore wind. And I'm pleased to say that with the Biden-Harris administration, we have established real leadership at the federal level that is advancing an all-of-government approach to transition to a renewable energy future, to fight climate change and create good-paying jobs. And I'm sure that David discussed our climate policy efforts across all agencies in greater detail this morning. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Bureau, BOEM is the federal agency tasked with managing energy and mineral resource development on the US Outer Continental Shelf, or OCS. Our responsibilities include managing conventional and renewable energy resources, as well as OCS sand and gravel resources, which are used for coastal protection and restoration projects. Our work is guided by rigorous science and knowledge-based environmental review and analysis. And of course, we're the lead regulatory agency for offshore wind. Under Secretary Haaland's leadership, the Interior has made tremendous progress to support the administration's efforts to advance offshore wind, and we're just getting started. This past spring, the Department of the Interior, along with the Departments of Commerce and Energy, came together to set an administration goal to deploy 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030, which will create nearly 80,000 jobs. And BOEM is playing a critical role in advancing this target. In May, we took a historic first step and approved the Vineyard Wind Project, which will be the first major commercial scale offshore wind project in the Outer Continental Shelf. We've advanced the proposed sale notice for the New York Bight, of course, located off the coasts of New York and New Jersey. And I'm pleased to tell you that we plan on holding that lease sale for the New York Bight in early 2022. Also in May, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Defense, and the state of California announced an agreement to advance areas for offshore wind off California's northern and central coasts. In July, we sought feedback from the regional Carolina Long Bay Task Force towards a possible future lease sale. In August, we published a final environmental impact for the South Fork project, of course, a project contracted with LIPA here in New York in the waters offshore Rhode Island. If approved, this would become the nation's second commercial scale wind project in the OCS approved under the Biden-Harris administration. Recently, the department announced that we're initiating the review of Atlantic Shores. Now that's the 8th project that we'd advanced towards environmental review in just the last 9 months, with more expected to come later this year. To date, we've leased 1.7 million acres on the US Outer Continental Shelf, and we have 18 commercial scale leases in the Atlantic. We plan to hold new lease sales and complete the review of at least 16 construction and operations planned by 2025. And just to give you a sense of scale, those COPs alone represent more than 19 gigawatts of new clean energy for the nation. We're also exploring opportunities in the Gulf of Mexico and offshore Oregon, and as you can see, we've been busy. Earlier this month, Secretary Haaland announced that BOEM has developed a new leasing path to help the administration achieve its 30 gigawatts by 2030 goal and contribute towards our goal of net zero emissions by 2050. This path will provide a roadmap to guide the way forward as we advance the administration's ambitious plans to confront climate change, create good-paying jobs, and begin the nation's transition to a cleaner energy future. Our path includes up to 7 new offshore lease sales by 2025, including those in the Gulf of Maine, the New York Bight, the Central Atlantic, offshore the Carolinas, California, Oregon, and maybe even the Gulf of Mexico. This is the first time BOEM has released a roadmap of regions under consideration for lease and potential timeframes for auction. By providing clear direction on our path, we're trying to remove the guesswork and inspire confidence among industry, ocean users, and other stakeholders. We want them to know what regions are under consideration so we can meaningfully engage with them to identify areas of least impact. Our goal is to provide industry and other stakeholders greater certainty and transparency about future leasing, while also building on the work we're doing to improve the leasing process. We're refining our area identification process to provide clear goals, objectives, and guidelines. This will not only reduce potential impacts early in the process, but also make the process more transparent to our government partners, industry, and ocean users. In addition to our work to improve clarity and transparency, we have several meaningful process improvements underway that will drive progress towards greater efficiencies in our project reviews. Based on the lessons learned, we're working on a number of initiatives to improve NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Review Act, and consultations, including revising BOEM's industry guidelines and developing process and content standardization for project submittals. We're collaborating with our federal partners at the National Marine Fisheries Service to develop a standardized Endangered Species Act consultation framework and a template for essential fish habitat assessments. We're also investing in science and advancing studies to ensure we have the best available information on critical issues such as the endangered North Atlantic right whale. And finally, we're taking a hard look at our lease stipulations to refine them in accordance with the administration's priorities. The New York Bight is actually a great example. When we published the proposed sale notice for public comment last June, we requested feedback on several innovative lease stipulations to underscore our commitment to creating good paying union jobs and engaging with all stakeholders and ocean users. Needless to say, exciting things are happening at BOEM. And I might be the only person at this meeting today who gets this excited about process, but I know that the real work is ensuring that we get this right so we can meet the administration's ambitious targets. What energizes me most about our path forward is that it incorporates the various components of our vision for offshore wind and will allow us to transform this vision into action. Let me explain. Critically, we are driven by the need to act on climate. Climate change poses an existential threat to all of us. We know we must transition to a clean energy future, and we must do it now. Our path forward acknowledges the need to tackle climate change head on. And at BOEM, when we think about climate, we think about jobs. Offshore wind can create thousands of jobs and a robust supply chain that would be accessible to communities all across the United States. I know that fostering job creation, equity, resiliency, and maximize economic development through offshore wind is an important priority for ACE New York, and it's also extremely important to the administration. That's why BOEM is laser focused on ensuring that creating good paying union jobs is a critical component of our offshore wind development process. We're also working to increase confidence in the domestic supply chain to meet the demand of these planned projects. But the federal government can't and shouldn't advance the nation's offshore wind industry on its own. Taken together, the great advancements from states and procurement and the progress on projects and lease areas are already spurring significant investments in our supply chain. States and industry have taken the first steps to seize this opportunity and build a series of projects in the United States, and we're seeing several exciting developments already. The construction of the first US offshore wind tower and transition piece manufacturing facility right there in New York, the construction of a manufacturing facility in New Jersey to supply wind farm monopiles, the construction of a foundation manufacturing facility in Rhode Island to support the assembly of Northeast offshore wind farms. And earlier this week, there was a launch ceremony in Virginia for what will be the first turbine blade facility in the United States. BOEM's path forward sends a clear signal to the industry and the nation that we are committed to doing our part to help spark economic growth, create good paying union jobs, support supply chain development, and create opportunities for underserved communities. We, of course, also need to develop offshore wind responsibly. It's BOEM's job to ensure that we avoid impacts to ocean users and the marine environment where possible. This means that we work to balance the needs of various ocean user groups throughout the development, and that we rely on the best available science and traditional knowledge to inform our decisions. Advancing both an efficient and effective process for reviewing plans to develop existing leases, and advancing an inclusive and expeditious process for identifying areas for potential future lease sales will help ensure offshore wind is developed responsibly. We're also developing a thoughtful approach to transmission, one that avoids and minimizes impacts to local communities, tribal nations, ocean users, and the environment, while ensuring adequate transmission to bring energy to shore. We'll seek to articulate further clarity in our process to increase our efficiency and help avoid impacts to the environment and ocean users where possible, and ensure that we can continue to develop offshore wind in a responsible way that's informed by traditional knowledge and the best available science. We need to robustly engage tribal nations and ocean users in our process. Collaborating with and engaging government entities, tribal nations, stakeholders, fishing communities, and other ocean users is a critical component of our offshore resource development process. One way we do this is by embracing the administration's all-of-government approach to clean energy development. For years, we have worked to cultivate successful partnership with multiple federal agencies. We engage in conversations and develop strong partnerships with states and local communities to develop solutions that will meet the needs of the new and growing industry. And we work closely with our diverse stakeholders and ocean users to ensure we are communicating early and often to help manage potential conflicts during project development. As part of our new path, we are committed to ensuring that our process and decisions will keep stakeholders and ocean users informed of our process and their opportunities to contribute. We are at an inflection point in our country's energy future. Offshore wind presents us with a once-in-a-generation opportunity to spur economic development, create good-paying union jobs, support local and underserved communities, and help address the dual crisis of climate change and economic inequality. The developments I've discussed today, combined with a growing nationwide interest in and demand for offshore wind energy, indicate that we are well positioned for a transition. We are forging a way to a clean energy future, a future for tomorrow, 2030, and beyond. We are moving forward. We are committed to working with governments, tribes, agencies, stakeholders, and ocean users to identify areas of least conflict and meet the nation's energy needs. But the full environmental and economic benefits of offshore wind can only be realized if we all come together to ensure that all potential development is considered and advanced. And that's why events like today's are so valuable. Continuing productive conversations with organizations like the Alliance for Clean Energy in New York will be critical to advancing offshore wind in a responsible way for New York and the rest of the nation. Together, we can help create a cleaner, more equitable energy future for our nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Nice to see you.
Great to see you, Anne.
I care a lot about process.
I'm glad to hear it. It's important.
It is. It's not always the the most riveting topic for others, but to get these projects over the finish line, it's just so important. And there's going to be more and more offshore wind projects coming to BOEM for permitting in the coming years from New York and from elsewhere. You mentioned some about standardizing the approach and giving some more guidance. Is there anything else you want to mention about how you think the permitting process might change over the coming years, or do you think it'll stay about the same?
That's a great question, Anne. We are working hard here at BOEM and also working closely with other federal agencies to take a hard look at our process to find efficiencies so that we can move forward expeditiously. I think we're seeing a few things. One is, I think we're identifying some issues that are truly regional or programmatic that we can handle really at a larger scale. in the context of these reviews. And partnering with NIMS in particular is really critical to that as we think about things like ESA or other consultations that we have. Also, we know that we've learned a lot, a great deal in the last 12 years since our regulations have been in place. And we also learned a lot through the Vineyard Wind process, as well as through South Fork, to really see what kind of efficiencies and process improvements we could make, even in sort of smaller things that we're seeing to be real time savers. And then last, I think there's a real question, and a good one, about what kind of information we need from the developers and when, and requirements in our regulations and otherwise, about how we can streamline that and think a little bit more thoughtfully about those approaches. So all these things are under consideration. And I truly believe that the work we're doing to standardize some of these processes, as well as applying the lessons learned, will alleviate a lot of the challenges we've seen so far in the permitting process.
Thanks for that. Yeah, if New York is a guide, getting that first one permitted was the hardest, and then things have gotten easier and better. So congratulations on the Vineyard Wind progress. Question on transmission. We've struggled in New York on our land-based transmission planning. Although, as Commissioner Howard mentioned, I think we're ahead of a lot of places. But when it comes to offshore wind, it's just super complicated, I would think, to get several different states, several different RTOs together to plan for offshore transmission. Anything else you can say about that? And personally, I'm interested in if you have any advice for us, like what can ACE do or can states do to help facilitate that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Anne, and a really important topic. Transmission is going to be really important for both onshore and offshore renewables. And I will say that I do believe that New York State has done a lot of really wonderful work on this already to identify where the constraints are. And I think I will not talk about the New York State study, but I do think that illustrates really where the pinch points are. I think with respect to offshore wind and what the states can do, one thing that I think is going to be really critical is thinking about a planned approach. And we really have key challenges, right? We have interconnection, we have the availability of onshore transmission, and we have the siting challenges, both onshore and offshore, to think about how we can avoid, minimize, or mitigate impacts to ocean users or communities. And a couple of things on that. BOEM has been partnering with the Department of Energy and has held a series of conversations with different stakeholder groups, the RTOs, NGOs, the states, and others, to really hear about the key challenges and opportunities. And from that, I think we'll continue to partner together to think about a planned approach. Something that's been incredibly clear is that we need a strong collaborative effort between states and the federal government. And I think being able to really work across the federal agencies and across states will be important. New York is a little bit unique just by the nature of New York, but generally we're going to see this region really need to come together to ensure that we do have adequate points of interconnection, and to ensure that we're doing what we can, because we have a great deal of activity in the Northeast offshore, to really have developers work together and work collaboratively on trying to minimize this impact. So I think, and the big takeaway for what states can do, I think, is to partner to really try and be proactive about solving some of these transmission issues rather than reactive, and really seek to try and encourage a state of collaboration.
Thanks. I have a feeling that the New York Offshore Wind Alliance will be starting to dedicate more and more attention to the transmission side of the question. So listen, this morning I got this call from David Hayes that he couldn't do his time slot because he had a meeting about the Build Back Better legislation, and we switched. I, for a moment, felt, Amanda, that I was, involved in the world of Washington, D.C.
You are, Anne. You are. A direct call from the White House from David Hayes. It's very impressive.
So I wanted to have a chance to ask you, how's the transition going, and do you miss us here in New York?
Well, I'm gonna.
You can't say
I
no.
don't want to dodge that question, and I'm not trying to dodge that question. Let me say first what I think David Hayes would have said. I didn't realize he wasn't here, and actually, we didn't discuss our remarks, but I do want to note that I feel very grateful to David and the White House team, because I know that in order for us to be successful, to see offshore wind really meet the targets that we know we need to meet to, we must work across the entire federal government to make this happen. And the White House has done a great job in really bringing together all of the relevant agencies to ensure that we are rowing in the same direction, and we all have very clear directives on getting this done. And I just want to really say that the administration's all of government approach is truly critical to our success, and I'm sure David would have talked about that. But to actually answer your question, Anne, of course I miss New York. It's I really did mean it, and I feel a little odd saying it, but I do believe that New York has led the way on offshore wind in many respects. New York has such tremendous leaders in the space with Doreen Harris and many others in state government, with I'm sure which will continue with even stronger leadership under Governor Hochul. And of course, I miss in particular the Alliance for Clean Energy and you, Ann Reynolds.
Thanks for that shout out, Amanda. Thanks also for being with us. We really appreciate it. You have your own race to run here when you're listing off all those numbers of permits and how many are coming your way, and all the lease auctions, and designating the new wind energy area. So it's clear to us from here that you're busy, but we wish you the absolute best of luck and hope to see you soon.
Well, thank you so much. Take care, Anne, and I look forward to hearing from you more.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Okay, folks, we have made our way to our lunch break. So the lunch break is from 12 until 12:30. Relax, have a snack, come back and join us at 12:30 for more of our program. And fear not, during the lunch break, we will have some slides that we're showing for your entertainment, so you can just leave it on if you'd like. Thank you so much for joining us, and please come back at 12:30. Hi, folks. Welcome back. I was just going to do very briefly a recap of some of the things we heard this morning. I think it's interesting how these topics fit together. I was really happy to hear Mr. Hayes' remarks about what the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill together have to offer for climate action and the clean energy industry. I couldn't help but think how that could help New York State if and when it comes to pass, or whatever version it comes to pass in. So that was exciting and certainly timely information. And Commissioner Howard was kind enough to share his views with us about the challenges at New York State level. I think it's good to have a reminder of how major this transition is and how we have to think about how we pay for it, who pays, when are decisions made about the changes that we need to make. And it was great to hear from Amanda Lefton too, the director of BOEM. I know the offshore wind developers that are members of ACE are extremely interested in when the offshore lease will be for the New York Bight, what will be the trajectory for permitting, what will be the plan and the process for investments in offshore transmission. And then we had 2 breakout sessions, one to delve into details about the plan for transportation emissions, the other to review where we are with permitting and taxation. And all of that is really important to ACE members as they look at the economic and business landscape in New York and decide if, how, when they can make the investments that we need. So thank you so much for joining us for all of that. We do now have a special message from another one of our representatives, Congressman Paul Tonko, my own congressman. So we will now turn to that message from Congressman Paul Tonko.
Hello, I'm Paul Tonko, and I want to welcome you to the Alliance for Clean Energy New York's 15th Annual Conference. I want to start by thanking the Alliance and its member companies and organizations for the continued efforts to make New York a cleaner, more competitive economy as we work toward our clean energy and climate goals. And as we begin to seriously consider the shape of our long-term economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, we have important questions to answer. Personally, I believe we need to build back better to make our economy cleaner, more just, and more competitive than where we were in early 2020. I also believe that transitioning to a 100% clean energy economy built on innovation and pro-worker policies is going to create untold numbers of jobs and economic opportunities for our country and our state. New York is leading in this direction, and it is past time for the federal government to catch up and to deliver a national climate response that bears more of the costs of a rapid and ambitious energy transition. As I record this video, members of the House, the Senate, and President Biden are in the middle of negotiations on 2 bills under consideration in Congress, the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better budget reconciliation package, which, if enacted, will deliver critical funds to New York State and clean energy project developers. These bills include programs to support existing and new clean energy resources, like the Clean Electricity Performance Program, and new tax credits for offshore wind, energy storage, and transmission, as well as a long-term extension with direct pay of the existing investment and production tax credits for wind and solar. These federal efforts complement the targets and investments being made by New Yorkers and will help ensure 70% of electricity is renewable in our state by 2030. These bills will also enable us to rebuild and decarbonize our ports to support new opportunities for offshore wind and domestic manufacturing. We will be able to upgrade our transit and rail systems while deploying a network of publicly accessible EV charging stations. We would also provide a long-term extension of the EV tax credit. We have included funding to support home energy retrofits and electrification of appliances to make our buildings more energy efficient. Through these types of investments, we can begin to tackle the climate crisis, improve our air quality, address historic environmental injustices, and create new economic opportunities and jobs throughout the state. We are fighting hard to get these bills done and to seize this once-in-a-generation opportunity to propel our economy forward. And I would welcome the opportunity to bring your priorities back to Washington and fight for them to be reflected in this and future efforts in Congress. Again, I thank you for advocating for policies of support for clean energy transition. I am grateful for our partnership on these issues, and I do hope you have a great conference. Success, everyone.
Really appreciate that video from Congressman Paul Tonko. I will tell you, where I live, my hamlet is the smallest zip code in America, and Paul Tonko makes it to the 4th of July parade every year. The parade lasts about 3 minutes, but he's always there, and we really appreciate, more importantly, that he's a steadfast supporter of clean energy in DC. So, but a few jobs back, he was president of NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, which is also one of the sponsors of our conference today. And so next up, we have a short video from NYSERDA.
This is New York's path towards what is possible, the charge we continue to lead, the fight on climate change, fueled by new technologies and innovations, new strategies, and a relentless commitment. Together, all of us continue to pave the way for cleaner communities across New York, toward hope, toward opportunity, toward realizing a cleaner, more sustainable future, so that tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that, New Yorkers will have smarter choices about how we use energy. Hopefully, the examples we set will help lead others, and our road less traveled will just become the way. The path to a clean energy future is a long one, but with the help of everyone here, our path is a path to possible.
And we always appreciate NYSERDA's support as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith Silliman from Cypress Creek Renewables, who also happens to be a member of the Alliance for Clean Energy New York's Board of Directors. Take it away, Keith.
Can you hear me okay, Ann?
I can.
Good, excellent. It is an honor to introduce Doreen Harris, the President and CEO of NYSERDA. Ms. Harris has held public and private sector leadership roles advancing clean energy projects for more than 20 years. During the last 10 years of public service, she has held executive, technical, and policy positions at NYSERDA. In her former role as Vice President of Large-Scale Renewables, she oversaw the state's nation-leading advancement of renewable resources under the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, including the development of offshore wind. Ms. Harris has a degree in engineering from the University of Rochester and an MBA from the University at Albany. Now here at Cypress Creek, as we wrap up our first 94C application, await the results of the latest direct solicitation, and commence pilot discussions, significant impact Doreen Harris has had on just about all aspects of our industry is abundantly clear. Her competence, effectiveness, and vision is greatly appreciated and will serve her and the renewable energy industry well as she steers the course at NYSERDA. Doreen, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Keith, thank you for the introduction. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yep, sounds good.
Great. Well, I do really appreciate the opportunity to be here today with so many partners and advocates for the important climate work we are doing. We as a state are moving forward with changing our energy landscape to meet our climate goals and ultimately achieve economy-wide decarbonization. So for the many of you present today, and especially under the umbrella of the Alliance for Clean Energy New York, this imperative has been at the forefront of your efforts for many years. And I have been and continue to be so proud to work with each of you toward the achievement, not only of your goals, but side by side to advance our important work together. So now as president of NYSERDA, it's exciting to see from a different perch, really, what this industry has accomplished and broadly how we can expand that again under the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And it is true, when we look at where we are as a state, it's not that different than where many other areas of our world are in really realizing the impact that climate change can and will have. And we know when we look at these changes, they're going to be with us at least for the rest of our lifetimes. So when I think about my work and you think about your work, we need to do so in the lens of a broader long-term benefit that we are bringing to society at large, back to our children and our children's children and beyond, as to how that collective action can provide help not only to many generations to come, but to every New Yorker as well. So I, for one, am thrilled to be working in a state and for a governor who recognizes this urgency and who has demonstrated already in her administration the commitment to not only recognize the issue, but to address it. So it is exciting here in New York, perhaps the most exciting time that some of us have seen in many years together, because ultimately we can't do it alone. We are part of a global movement, and that in and of itself is an exciting time to be working in this space. And I know that we need both the public and the private sectors to be contributing to drive the change at the scale that we need. So when we do our work, we do so with engagement and collaboration in all that we do, not only with respect to transmission or the transition and the solutions that will be brought to bear to achieve that transition, but also how to think about our work through that critical lens of equity and inclusion as well. So it is true, all roads lead in our Climate Act analysis to a future with very significant shifts in our electric generation mix. And we certainly, through the Climate Act, have begun to thoroughly consider and examine a number of possible solutions and the opportunities and costs that come with them toward the achievement of our goals. We are going to need a new portfolio of resources when we get to 2040 and beyond. I'm guessing there are resources that will be brought to bear that none of us have even conceived of yet. So we are just at the beginning of integrating the amounts of new renewable energy that will be needed to get to our goals. But it is true that these electrification activities that are implicit within other sectors of our economy are only going to raise the bar for those ACE New York members here present today. So the Climate Act did establish a 22-member Climate Action Council, which I co-chair with New York State DEC Commissioner Basil Sagos. And it would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge your contributions to the Climate Action Council as a member, but also as one who, in my view, represents critical views as to those represented by people here today. I'm pleased to say the Climate Action Council work is on schedule. We will be producing a scoping plan later this year, and that plan is going to be critical because it will be the roadmap to advance the goals of the Climate Act in a very tangible way. We had 7 sector-specific advisory panels that provided recommendations that have now come together in a broader integration analysis that I'd like to talk about a little bit here today. We have 2 working groups, the Climate Justice Working Group and the Just Transition Working Group, both of whom are providing critical input and leadership in, again, this goal for an equitable transition as we see it moving forward. So in the last couple of weeks and in the last couple of Climate Action Council meetings, we have presented the results of an analysis addressing the scenarios for the achievement of the goals. So again, the goals are in the Climate Act. Our job is to figure out the pathway to get there. And it is true that the pace and the scale of our commitment must only accelerate as we head past 2030 and toward 2040 and 2050. Just to give you some numbers, the modeling shows that upwards of 60 gigawatts of solar may be necessary, tens of gigawatts of land-based wind, and the same for offshore wind. So when I hear those numbers, I think about the opportunity that it presents for all of us in really scaling up this transition at a magnitude that we maybe hadn't even been thinking about before. It is true that significant investments will be needed to achieve the act itself, and those investments will provide significant benefits. And that's been another piece of analysis that we've been looking at. Not just hundreds of thousands of jobs, but also cleaner air and healthier communities at the same time. So when we looked at this from a societal perspective, through a very complex analysis, we concluded that the net benefits of taking action on these harmful emissions responsible for our changing climate outweigh the cost of inaction by at least $80 billion. So together, when we look at the benefits, as I said, the avoiding the economic impacts of damages caused by climate change and the improvement in public health, the benefits range from $420 to $430 billion. So what does that mean? These are big numbers, but what does it mean? It means that there is a transformation in our lives and in our society, but one that is for the good. It means cleaner air. It means fewer hospital visits. It means lower healthcare costs. It means lives saved from premature death. And it means good quality jobs and careers. And it also means that on a global scale, we will have fewer and less intense extreme weather events battering our communities. So this is the commitment that we have to make to combat climate change. And I'm very pleased to say that our work is continuing apace to both analyze and advance the scoping plan. And there's more to come. We have a long-awaited job study that we'll be issuing very shortly, and feedback will be presented at our next meeting in November. But ultimately, this scoping plan is going to feature opportunities to advance building electrification, electric vehicle and charging infrastructure, a build out of transmission, distribution, and electric grid infrastructure. And of course, as we look forward, the exploration and strategic use of green hydrogen in these tough to electrify applications. So I do encourage the members of ACE New York and those here today to review the draft when it's available. We will be executing a very robust public comment period thereafter and public hearings as well. And ultimately, it is the case that this will inform the final scoping plan, which will be issued later in 2023. So now, what are we doing to actually get to these goals here today? Certainly, it is the case that the scale of our commitments only needs to expand. We are very focused on driving down energy demand through energy efficiency policies and programs and through new and innovative products to help businesses and companies reduce both emissions and energy costs. Buildings are a massive source of greenhouse gas emissions, and we are putting billions of dollars together with utilities on the table to bring forth those changes, again, the electrification and beyond that we seek. We are investing in transportation, of course, not only clean transportation infrastructure and electric vehicle adoption, but broadly from a policy perspective, we are looking at policies through Governor Hochul to only expand on those investments as we move forward. And of course, near and dear to our ACE New York heart, we are investing in renewables at a scale that those of us who have been in the state for decades would say is truly unprecedented. We already have an impressive pipeline of large-scale renewable projects that each of you are building as we speak, over 20 this year alone, which is awesome to see. But we also have, as Ann noted, the expansion of our thinking into the offshore wind sector as well, and a goal that is the largest in the nation, of course. But that's really just the beginning. We're seeing the expansion of these activities into our ports, into our supply chain, into our industries. An amazing event just a few weeks ago was an event at the Port of Coiman, south of Albany, where Governor Hochul announced the largest single offshore wind supply chain contract of $86 million between Ørsted and Eversource and Riggs Distler to support our Sunrise Wind project. Now, why is that interesting to me? Well, that's interesting to me, of course, because of the numbers and the opportunity, but it's also interesting because what we see is these broad state policies bringing forward very specific investments in our state that we only want to build upon. There are jobs in the capital region, but also jobs in Western New York that will support that activity. And really, it is happening at a scale that even I'm a bit surprised by from time to time. It is the moment for us to really lean into these investments and the benefits that come from them. And we very much look forward to our next solicitation just as soon as Director Lefton gives us the go-ahead through the leasing auction that you referenced a bit ago, Anne. And of course, it would be remiss of me not to mention the major Climate Week announcement under our Tier 4 solicitation. Governor Hochul announced what is a true step change in our state. And I think that's how this investment will be looked upon in the future. Not one, but two renewable infrastructure projects to bring upstate wind, solar, and hydro and Canadian resources into New York City, where I would say it is one of our biggest challenges is really decarbonizing the grid in the city. So there are two projects that we will be advancing through the Public Service Commission soon. And really, when they are built, they're going to realize benefits of a magnitude that we need to be very impressed by, not only billions in public health benefits, but jobs and infrastructure beyond. And it doesn't stop there. I mean, that very same day, Governor Hochul, announced for the expansion of our solar goal from 6 gigawatts to 10 gigawatts by 2030. So when we look at Governor Hochul's announcement, it's really looking at both sides of the equation, the distributed side in expanding our New York Sun goal and the Tier 4 side in expanding our commitment to bulk transmission and renewable delivery. So what we're seeing here are step changes, very necessary step changes under her leadership. So we are really just getting started. That's the reality of it. Certainly these projects, we have created the preconditions for these investments to occur, but we need to get them built. And I know there's been milestones this year you've already talked about that are implicitly focused on doing just that. They need to be built in a responsible way. They need to be built in a way that the communities can support and engage within. And I'm pleased to say that we're making very good progress together in realizing those objectives. And we at NYSERDA are advancing all of our work through this critical lens of equity, inclusion, and the focus on disadvantaged community benefits. It is critical to say that everything within the Climate Act is focused on these principles, and our work, whether it be through our Clean Green Schools initiative, our clean energy hubs, the Climate Justice Fellowship Program, and beyond, is really advanced through that lens. And you'll see more of that. You'll see more of it in our RFPs, you'll see more of it in our contracts, and you'll see more of it throughout our agency's work. We are strongly committed to engaging with community partners statewide to encourage their participation in our processes as they move forward. So as we enact our ambitious clean energy plan for New York State, we welcome opportunities to work with each of you and the Alliance for Clean Energy New York so we can develop, again, successful state policy under Governor Hochul's leadership, but also climate solutions that make sense for all New Yorkers. So I want to thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be working with ACE New York and its members again for over a decade, and I look forward to that collaboration expanding over time. Thanks, Anne.
Thanks, Doreen. We've known each other for a long time. And so when you say we're just getting started, I'm like, oh, good God, really?
Long haul, Anne, long haul.
Do you have a couple minutes for questions? I didn't ask you beforehand. I'm sorry to say.
No, yeah, I'd be glad to.
Good. Okay. Well, one of the things that occurs to me, I mean, I can guarantee you that someone on the ACE team is bothering someone at NYSERDA nearly every day. We have, conversations with folks on the transportation side, on the efficiency side, your old group at Large Scale Renewables, a lot lately about standardized taxation. We haven't talked too much about the supply chain challenge and opportunities. And I was lucky enough to be at that same event at the Port of Queens. I thought it was great. And I was wondering, what could ACE do to make sure that more of this happens? So it's kind of an open question, I'm sorry to say, but as we've tackled procurement and we've tackled those development challenges, the next step up the chain to me is, can we do anything to help with supply chain or with port development that we're not doing yet?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say again, under our leadership of Governor Hochul, this is central to who she is and what she cares about. She cares about climate, definitely, but does she care about benefits and investments coming to New York? Absolutely. Right? It's about jobs, jobs, and jobs, full stop. So with that said, ACE, I think, has expanded over the years, at least that's my impression, I don't want to presume, but to really look at a broader and broader ecosystem that is necessary together to achieve the goals of the state and to bring the industry forward. What I'm seeing though is it's true, I'm seeing that industry expand. My definition of supply chain is intentionally very broad. It means it's the steel plant in Wellsville, which is the plant that's supplying steel to the Port of Queens for Reed Stisler to do their work. And it means that suppliers who don't even recognize themselves as potential participants in the offshore wind industry or the renewable industry or the transportation industry, they need to be brought to bear in a broader way. I think it's a great question, Anne. I'm glad you're willing to take that on because the opportunity space is there. We run a number of forums. In fact, we're doing an offshore wind forum in a bit. And it's always amazing to know and to learn more about the companies that are here and that are ready to sort of serve that industry. But I would imagine there would be a benefit in some organizing of that opportunity. And I think ACE could be very useful in doing so beyond the turbine suppliers as an example, or it goes deeper than that.
Thanks. Well, I don't know exactly what we should do about it in the coming year, but I am interested and willing. And so let's talk about that further sometime. I also just one narrow question. You mentioned the Clean Energy Hubs announcement, and some form of that is something that ACE members have been asking for a while, and I was happy to see it announced. Can you say a little bit more about how that program is going to work?
Yeah, I mean, at the root of the need, and we have actually an entirely reconstituted team at NYSERDA focusing on communities and partnerships. Some may know Jason Doling at NYSERDA. He's leading that team, formerly of energy storage fame. But really, the root of the issue, and again, implicit within the Climate Act, is that our work needs to become much more focused on people and on places and on, I would say, communities as influential in program design and in broader awareness of opportunities. So we're doing a number of different things. There's some work we're doing internally to ensure that we have the proper resources to develop programs consistent with that effort. The hubs are actually intended to be a bit different in that they are intended to be community-based organizations that are able to become, I'll call it those conduits, those translators, those organizers on a very local level to not only help navigate the ecosystem that is programs and policies across our state and our nation, but further to ensure that we have that, I'll call it that framework that is very local and community-based to help us deliver information and resources as well. So we actually, I think it was today, we just reissued the RFP and put a bit of a longer window to respond. because we're needing to think differently. When you're working with these types of organizations, they, it's just a different form of engagement. Need more time, need more in the way of resources, and fundamentally provide, I think, huge value though in getting, as I said, much more local in our work.
Got it. Every time I see one of these announcements, I'm like, oh, there's more work for NYSERDA.
Yeah.
Very good. So for my last question, I was going to ask you a little bit about the interaction with what's going on at the federal government now. We had David Hayes speak to us this morning to remind us of all of the elements of both the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better reconciliation bill that could help us on our clean energy transition. But then again, none of that is guaranteed. We'll see how the rest of the week and month goes. And then we had John Howard speaking about how we need to pay for this in a diverse way, not just with ratepayer funding. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to comment on that, like what you're hoping for out of the federal bill, knowing that we need to diversify our funding sources for all of this work.
Yeah, it is the case. I've watched this progress, and in fact, there's been some big milestones today, apparently, as well. Listen, I mean, the federal government is implicitly integrated in our work, not just because it's useful from a policy coordination perspective, but further, it's critical from an implementation perspective. So, I mean, I am encouraged by what I'm hearing to some degree with respect to some of the tax credit extensions and others that seem to be even expanding in the newer versions of these bills. But I think more broadly, there is policy alignment in a way that's tremendously useful, certainly to us in ensuring that our work isn't at odds with the federal government. Like a great example is their Justice 40 initiative, largely aligned with the Climate Act and its objectives from the perspective of disadvantaged communities. But it is true, we are going to have a very serious and important discussion in the coming year about just this question, which is not just what are the pathways to get us from here to the goals of the Climate Act. There's a number of scenarios we've built that are going to help us have some really interesting discussions about the trade-offs associated with them. But those pathways, irrespective of which we choose, it is the magnitude of the investment is one that isn't going to be the state's investment alone, certainly. And I put the federal government and the private market certainly in that same category of necessary partners and many more. It's tricky. It's tricky. There is not a silver bullet to the implementation of this and the payments thereof. When you really look at the recommendations of the panels, it is there's some big ones, but there's also a lot of little ones. I am seeing a lot of hard work coming our way to turn the tide little by little, as well as with more significant policies that could be brought to bear. But I actually looked at the list the other day. It's really long. It's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of recommendations. So yeah, and we're just at the beginning of the story. I'm sorry to tell you. It keeps going.
I'm a little too old to hear that, but I actually looked at the recommendations yesterday too, because I was looking up a couple facts for my opening remarks, and it's voluminous, and there are just so many good ideas. And the fact that those panels reach consensus on all of those ideas is monumental. But, folks like you sitting in your chair look at that as a long to-do list, and it's a lot of work.
It is.
But we're so glad that you're doing it, and thank you for doing all that you do, and also thank you for speaking with us today. We really appreciate it. I'm sure that if not you, then someone else from NYSERDA will be bothered by an East member at some point today.
Hey, it's all good.
Everything that you do is so critical to everything our member companies are trying to do to build in New York.
Well, thanks for having me. I hope everyone enjoys the conference. I know it's always one of my favorites.
Thanks, Doreen.
Thank you.
Take care. Talk soon.
Yep.
So before we move to the next breakout sessions, we do have another short video from one of our sponsoring organizations. I believe next up is Invenergy. And we certainly appreciate the support from Invenergy as well. So now we are going to have breakout sessions again. And so you have two choices. One is on Zone J, how to power New York City with renewables. So there's a lot of different ways to look at the clean energy transition. One of those ways is how do we green the grid of New York City? And so we have a great group of folks that are going to be talking about that. That's breakout session 2A. So if you want to join that breakout session, there will be a link in chat for session 2A, Zone J, how to power New York City with renewables, and you click on that. And just a reminder, if you're asked, would you like to leave this Zoom and join the other, you want to answer yes to that question. The other breakout session is on building electrification. And Doreen just mentioned this in her remarks. One of our major challenges in New York, and one that is coming up again and again in the deliberations of the Climate Action Council, is how are we going to decarbonize our buildings? I think there's 5.5 million buildings in New York. So there's a lot of work to do. So that session is called Building Electrification, How to Change the Way We Live. And we've got some great panelists that are going to talk about those questions. Again, if you want to join breakout session 2B, you go to the chat, you click on the link for breakout session 2B, Building Electrification, and that will take you right over to that session. And once again, not to be too redundant, if you're asked, would you like to leave this Zoom and join another, you say yes to that and jump over to that session. And I'm going to do that myself because I'm moderating. As I'm talking here, I realize I got to get over there. So I will see any of you who join the Zone J session. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our conference. I hope you had some good discussions on the one session about how to green New York City's grid, and on the others, how to electrify New York City and the rest of New York State's buildings. So next up on the agenda is the presentation of our annual Clean Energy Award. And actually, that's not the next thing up on our agenda. Before I turn it over to you, Sam, we have another video from one of our sponsoring members. We really appreciate the support of RWE and National Grid. And so we're going to have a short video from them before we go to the awards.
Offshore wind energy really needs to play a foundational role in the clean energy transition. It's affordable, it's clean, and it's abundant. And in that way, it will meet all of the policy goals that we have here in the Northeast and ultimately across the U.S.
New York has a goal of 9 gigawatts of power coming from offshore wind, and New Jersey has a goal of 7.5. So we definitely want to be a part of that process.
National Grid has significant expertise in developing subsea electricity interconnectors, but also deep local expertise, particularly in the Northeast.
We knew we wanted a partner with a lot of strength and capability in the space, and RWE fits that.
We need to build out a clean energy supply massively. We are one of the biggest offshore wind players in the world, and we want to contribute to that.
The facts were indicating that this could be a good match, but there was also a very strong positive gut feel.
This partnership complements our work on onshore renewables development, as well as the work of our broader network business in facilitating and interconnecting renewables.
But just as importantly, I'm truly excited about the talented teams that we both have working on this joint venture and what they're going to be able to produce together.
The partnership is built on a lot of mutual respect and trust. We have very candid conversations, and so that's one of the things that I'm most excited about.
And ultimately, of course, we want to turn that into commercial success.
We both have the same vision for the clean energy transition. We're both committed to making it a reality, and offshore wind is a critical piece of that for the Northeast U.S.
And with that, I am going to turn it over to Samantha Wilch from the Natural Resources Defense Council, who is going to present this year's Clean Energy Advocate Award.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'm Samantha Wilt. I'm part of the New York Energy team at the Natural Resources Defense Council, as Anne said, and I'm so pleased to be here to present ACE New York's 2021 Clean Energy Advocate Award to New Yorkers for Clean Power and its director, Betta Broad. I'm very lucky to work with the New Yorkers for Clean Power team frequently, and I'm thrilled that ACE is recognizing them for their incredible work to support solar and wind projects, including their advocacy toolkit that supports citing these projects. And an awesome ACE member will be posting in the chat, so you can go look at it yourself if you haven't yet. New Yorkers for Clean Power is a statewide collaborative campaign to rapidly shift to a clean energy economy. Through education, advocacy, and organizing, the campaign engages the public, local governments, and businesses to advance a range of renewable energy, energy efficiency, heat pump, and clean transportation solutions. New Yorkers for Clean Power is also focused on creating jobs in these clean energy industries for all communities in New York and developing the next generation of clean energy advocates through their youth leadership programs. Betta has been an organizer for social justice, peace, and sustainability for nearly 2 decades, apparently starting in the 2nd grade. She organized the major Earth Day festivals in New York City for 5 years before joining the campaign to ban fracking. While working for Catskill Mountain Keeper, she created the Renewable New York program that subsequently received a $1.8 million award from NYSERDA to expand solarized campaigns across 15 counties. She is one of the co-founders of the New York Energy Democracy Alliance and serves on the board of Citizens for Local Power. As a resident of Kingston, she has been appointed to the Kingston Climate Smart Commission, the Kingston Conservation Advisory Council, and the Ulster County Climate Smart Committee. Betta and her tiny but mighty team work on all these issues, covering the whole state, in person before COVID, and now virtually, at town meetings, hearings, rallies, and their excellent teach-ins. And I know many of you today at the conference have spoken at and participated in these great teach-ins, so thank you. This award is in recognition of New Yorkers for Clean Power's tremendous work promoting community understanding and community support for upstate grid-scale wind and solar projects. And as a part of that critical work, they developed and distributed their toolkit. They have literally, in the toolkit, written the book on strong science-based activism for clean energy progress. And it's a fantastic resource for folks who want to make a difference and help in their communities with citing the grid-scale renewable projects we need to make New York carbon-free. As we all know, we can have some of the best goals in the world, but if we don't get the steel in the ground, we will not reach those goals. And that's why the work of New Yorkers for Clean Power is absolutely essential. With their relentless positivity, deep expertise, and generosity of spirit, New Yorkers for Clean Power educates, energizes, and inspires so many of the people they come in contact with. The students, the elected officials, and the grassroots activists, all working to make our great state better. Thank you, Betta, and the rest of the amazing New Yorkers for Clean Power team for all your excellent work with communities to get our clean energy future built. Keep it up.
Oh, thank you so much, Sam and Anne and everybody. That is so sweet. I wish we were in person so I could hug you. But it's wonderful to hear those kind words and to be here with you all. And we really appreciate the support of ACE. And, you know, NYCP is a collaborative campaign. So in addition to our small team, we really rely on our amazing steering committee, which includes Sam and Anne and others who are probably on this call. But, you know, thank you so much for this award and for all of the fantastic collaborative work that we get to do together. You know, we have a really wonderful team that I just want to shout out, especially Michaela Shavako, who's been working with us for the past, I think, 4 years and was instrumental in our toolkit, which we launched this year with the Nature Conservancy. And many of you probably have gotten the chance to work with Andrew Pizzullo on our supporter work, which ACE has been a tremendous partner in. This year, we also very happily brought on Jen Metzger, our policy advisor, a former state senator, and that has just been wonderful. And now we have our Clean Power team, our fellows, which we were delighted to kick off also this year. So much happening. So, you know, big shout outs to Gregory, Bubba, Rose, Bryn, Desiree, and most recently, Ibrahim. So we've got a pretty fantastic team of fellows, and we want to keep growing that group so we have more people on the ground in their communities doing this incredible work so we can transition as quickly as possible off fossil fuels to clean energy. We want to do that for all the obvious reasons, like having a sustainable planet and a place for future generations to thrive. And of course, we want to do it equitably. And we want all New Yorkers to really benefit from this transition. So, you know, it's just an absolute honor and pleasure to get to work with you all on this important work. I don't think there's anything more important that we could be doing. So thank you for, you know, showcasing NYCP and just being such a tremendous partner. Love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Betta. And I'll send you this in the mail.
Thank you. And we'll hang it in our office.
Okay. One last thing I want to mention about New Yorkers for Clean Power is that we did have a 5K. We do have a 5K race. You can do it until tomorrow. The race for renewables as part of this conference. I think there's a link in the chat if you want to sign up. If you do sign up, a $15 donation goes to New Yorkers for Clean Power, or more if you choose to. And we want you to run around your neighborhood and send us some good pictures. So thanks for that, and thanks to Betta. And now for our next speaker, I'm going to ask Noah Shaw from Foley Hoag to join us to introduce the new speaker. Foley Hoag is a member of ACE as well as a sponsor this year of our conference. Do we have Noah here?
And I'm just getting Noah some dial-in information. He's having an audio connection issue.
Okay.
Oh, looks like he's here now.
There he is. Hi, Noah.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can. I'm turning it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne. Hello, everyone. I'm Noah Shaw, a partner in the energy and climate practice of the law firm Foley Hoag. It's a sincere pleasure to introduce you to who I think to be the hardest working employee of the state of New York, Hutan Moaveni, Executive Director of the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, commonly called ORES. I've known Hutan for many years, from the time I was general counsel at NYSERDA, and Hutan was in the New York Sun program, crisscrossing the state on a daily or weekly basis to sit with local officials, developers, and residents in our great state's Grange halls, school meeting rooms, community center gymnasiums, and just about every other local gathering spot you can think of, talking through all the difficult issues that arise around a proposed solar project in their community. From then until now, Houtan has proven himself committed, head and heart, and expert beyond compare with respect to the cause of responsible siting of renewable energy projects here in New York. Probably the most important component of the state meeting the requirements of the Community Leadership and Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. From even before ORES was created, Houtan has been the principal engineer of this new office and its processes for permitting major renewable facilities. And early returns on his work are very promising. ORES hit its mark in issuing new regulations to guide its review process and set SMART standards, which are a watershed improvement over the old Article 10 process. In only the first few months of having its doors open, the office already has 9 projects under review, and many more have signified their intention to transfer from Article 10 or file new applications. And the regulations that Houtan's office had issued have already survived with flying colors and initial legal challenge, with respect to which I'm proud to say Foley Hoag represented East New York. With the inevitable challenges to come as this nascent office continues to grow, and we hope to grow with even more staff in this year's coming budget, and to grow into its central role in New York's renewable energy future, I can think of nobody better to guide it than Houtan. And with that, I give you Director Moaveni.
Wow, thanks, Noah. I really appreciate the kind words and the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are well and staying safe. Before I begin, I want to thank ACE New York for allowing me to speak with you all this afternoon. I want to give special thanks to Kyle for a lot of back and forth to try to make this type of virtual event happen. So job well done, Kyle, and the entire ACE team. I know everyone here is familiar with what's going on with ORES, but just to provide some additional context, I'm going to provide you with a quick update about the office. I'll try to keep it very short and precise. Hopefully, we'll get at the end of the discussion some questions. As Noah pointed out, to build upon New York State Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, known as CLCPA, New York State enacted the Accelerated Renewable Energy Growth and Community Benefit Act on April 3rd, 2020. The main objective of the act was to improve the regulatory process for permitting and siting major renewable energy facilities, as well as transmission infrastructure in an environmentally responsible and cost-effective manner. I don't want to get into the details of the act, but as one of the 3 main elements of the act, the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, known as ORES, or in the remaining part of this presentation today, I'm going to just refer to it as the office, was created. And this office has the authority to issue a single permit for permitting of any major renewable energy facilities in New York State. The statute required the office to promulgate regulations within a year in order to implement the Executive Law 94C. In order to meet that deadline, the office issued its draft regulations on September 16, 2020 for public comments. The office accepted public comments through December 7th, 2020. And then fast forward, the regulations became effective on March 3rd, 2021. As Noah pointed out, promulgating regulations was certainly an important step to implement the new act. We really tried to create an efficient process to scale up renewable energy development in New York State, while also considering all pertained social, economic, and environmental factors in permitting of these facilities with input from host communities and our local officials. We can probably all agree that the progress of getting large-scale renewable energy projects built in New York State has been slow so far. But now that we have the Office of Renewable Energy siting up and running, and we have actual regulations to streamline the process, these projects should get to construction much faster. To date, the office is working on full 9 applications with another 49 application in the various pre-application stage. June of this year, the office issued its first 2 final permits. These 2 permits were the fastest large-scale clean energy projects permitted in the history of New York State. The credit really goes to the host communities, local officials, certainly the applicants, and my colleagues from the state, both working for ORES and other sister agencies. I hope we can, repeat this for more projects. We really need this kind of a time frame in order to meet our ambitious targets. As we move forward with the 94C process, some of these best practices are beginning to emerge. How to avoid major issues basically that could delay a permit. In the interest of time, I just wanted to highlight a few points today. I hope we can, and I had this conversation with Kyle, I hope we can schedule a separate meeting. More than anything else, actually, I wanted to hear from my peers from the industry how the office is doing and how we can certainly improve things. But really, in the interest of time, just wanted to highlight a few points. Point 1 is please approach us early and approach us often. The earlier that you communicate with the office, the greater of the chance of eliminating any major issues that may delay a permit. Second point is please adhere to the procedure. Collectively, we have worked really hard, try to establish this standardized process. The regulations are a comprehensive blueprint on how to navigate through the permitting process. I don't want to get into every step of the way and discuss that, but really through the pre-application process, the office will work with all stakeholders, but in this case, my audience are primarily our applicants, to avoid and minimize major siting impacts. And the main intent here in the pre-application process is to avoid and minimize an impact in first instance before an application is submitted. So there is none of this back and forth with incomplete application, which as you all know, it has been a very cumbersome part of the siting processes in New York State. We have designed the application process in a way that will drive applicants toward compliance with uniform standards and conditions. The structure of the application itself sets very specific design goals and methodologies for analyzing the impacts. Something that's very important is, and I want to highlight, is unlike Article 10, rather than negotiating or litigating requirements for each impact category with multiple state agencies at each individual site, the fact that right now we have uniform standards and conditions, and the fact that majority of these substantive requirements that will be imposed in a single permit is available and known to applicants and developers ahead of time should allow you to design your facilities accordingly. And last but certainly not least, building local support for these projects is just as crucial as getting ORES approval, if not more important. Certainly for those of you that I have had the pleasure of working with, you know that from my perspective, the keys to a successful siting process is a well-prepared local government and informed communities. Please try to establish a good working relationship with host communities, develop and maintain a direct and open line of communication with our local leaders. What we have established in the regulations are absolute minimum level of outreach, but there is no limit on the amount of outreach on a developer can engage in to help foster this relationship. I think I'm a little bit over my time. Just to wrap up here, we are laser focused in this moment on reaching our 70 by 2030 target and working collaboratively with all stakeholders. Despite a lot of challenges. Despite a lot of challenges, we are moving full steam ahead to set up this office. We are committed to be creative and flexible and think out of box in any way, shape, or form we can to develop this project in our own state. As many of you know, it has been a very busy summer for the office as we work to process many applications before us and the ones that yet to come. I really want to take this opportunity here and speak to our main audience here, our developers here, and really thank them for your patience with ORES as we press forward. This is in no way, shape, or form is the stage or status that I would like to see ORES in. So I appreciate your continued support, and I appreciate your patience with us. The truth is, this is hard. And as all of you probably know, this journey has not been without its challenges. No one has ever done this before. We are setting a model for the rest of the nation. CLCPA is complex, is ambitious, and is very comprehensive. And we cannot expect changes to happen overnight. It's going to take all of us working together to transform our society and save our planet. We must do everything we can today to ensure we have a sustainable future for our children. I believe we can make the shift, and I hope you will continue to support the office. That's about all I have. Noah or Anne, again, thank you everyone for listening. I think I'm free if you wanted to see if we have any questions for me.
Thank you, Hutan. Really appreciate it. We know how busy you are and how many projects you have coming your way. But I do want to take the opportunity to ask a couple questions, and also to let our participants know that you can put questions in through the Q&A function on Zoom. You're very welcome to do that. But we do have some already. And one is, and you did start to touch on this, but I guess the questioner is just wondering if there's any more specifics. Lessons learned with respect to best practices for engaging local governments. Have you seen any particularly good examples of projects where, as you said, the local government was well prepared, where it was clear to you that the developer had done what they should have done with building that relationship with the local government? Or I guess in contrast, you could say, give us any examples where they didn't, and you know something that would not be best practices there.
I think you know this, Anne, that I'm not going to speak or talk about any specific application in front of the office, but generally speaking, as Noah pointed out, for a few years, my job was to travel from South Shore of Long Island to the Canadian borders on a weekly basis. And so this is something that I had the privilege of seeing kind of firsthand myself. So something that, and I don't mean to speak on behalf of the local governments or communities in any way, shape, or form, but something that I have seen is really transparency and being available and making yourself available. So like when we are speaking of community outreach, is not really about convincing a local official or a town that we should pursue a project or not. It's really about sharing information and making information available to them, and to be transparent and be available. So I wish I could give you a lot of good examples that I have seen over the course of last 4 or 5 years in New York State, that our developers have done a phenomenal job on the ground level and try to help prepare the communities and local officials. But unfortunately, I cannot give you any specifics.
That's fair. So a couple questions about species mitigation things. Is DEC still handling the decisions about species mitigation? That's one question. And is there any update on the species mitigation fund?
On the species mitigation bank fund, like I know DEC staff are actively working on it. I do not have any information about actually when the regulations and information will be available. So I don't know on that one. On the first question, the office is required by law to consult with DEC on the T&E, or generally speaking, wildlife issues. And credit to office staff as well as my colleagues from DEC. We have been working very closely on, as I mentioned, a large number of applications today. So ultimately, ORAS will have to make the final decision in various stages, but we certainly consult with DEC. It's not just unique to DEC. Honestly, at this point, the office consults with respective agencies in their relevant resource impacts, and we'll try to get information and discussion with them ahead of time. But at the end of the day, ORAS is the central agency or entity responsible for making the final determinations.
Thanks. All right, we've got another question here about ORAS's general thoughts on dual use solar, or how you would view that in reviewing a permit application.
Again,
solar agriculture and solar activity.
So, I mean, we have, when you look at the 94C, for the first time in the history of New York State, we have created basically a new exhibit or specific section in our application requirements to establish certain standards for impacts to farmland. I don't want to get into the details of it, but certainly we have established a standard there, which is on the promise of like avoid, minimize, mitigate impacts. We have defined what, from the 94C perspective, what would be an impact to farmland. And then as a part of the Exhibit 15, and certainly we are asking information for the office to make certain findings in the draft permit, and ultimately the requirement that we have in the Uniform Standards and Conditions. We are asking for agricultural mitigation plan, which essentially would be a mean that if any significant impact to farmland cannot be avoided or minimized, what would be an applicant's strategy try to mitigate those options. And as one of the menu of options on the table to applicants try to mitigate impacts to farmland is the co-utilization option. It's not a mandatory requirement in the 94C regulations, but certainly we have some specific requirement if an applicant were to propose co-utilization as a mitigation option.
Thanks, Hutan. I'm not sure you're going to be able to answer this one, but I'm going to ask it. Apparently, years back, Department of State issued some standard fire codes for wind facilities. And we have a question about whether Department of State could issue some standard fire code for solar facilities as well. I know ORAS is part of the Department of State, but has that issue come your way, the need for some standard fire codes for solar?
I can look into it. I think as far as I know, we have the New York State Uniform Code, and as a part of that, we have, I think in right now, the current version of the Uniform Code, we are referencing International Fire Code 2021. I can certainly look into like what specifically we have. I know I was directly involved with the International Fire Code 2021 and Uniform Code adoption for battery energy storage, but like for solar and wind, I can look into it and get back to it.
Okay, thanks. Another question, again, not sure if this is exactly one that you can issue. We have a couple members that are looking ahead and worrying about turbine delivery challenges in the construction season, especially with respect to the routes that they take and having state trooper escorts. So first off, I consider this like in some ways a nice problem to have, because it means we're actually getting some projects to construction. But does ORAS address that at all in terms of laying out the routes they have to take, or if they need to take, oh, you do, okay. Anything else you want to say about that one?
No, I mean, we would be happy to continue to work. I mean, certainly that's, I mean, folks may not appreciate how difficult it is to build renewable energy projects in New York State. And this just is like another good example that how difficult it is to do that. And despite a lot of planning ahead of time, at the end of the day, you have to adjust and make changes in order to I don't know, deal with the situation that you might have on the ground that you had not seen before. We are willing. I think my response would be not so much from Aura's perspective, but I can speak on behalf of my colleagues from DPS. We would be happy to work with you during the compliance and construction phase, and we are going to collectively figure out the solution.
Yeah. Yep. And we certainly at ACE are working on it already. We're hoping it's one of those problems that if we work on it a lot now, it never actually becomes a problem in terms of limitations on routes for these turbine parts. I mean, you know, one of the funny things that I've learned this year that each turbine takes 11 separate super loads to get to the site. So that means 11 state trooper escorted loads. So it's just something that they're worrying about. And as I say, it's a detail, but a problem that will be nice to have. We have another question about eagles. They're an endangered species in New York, but the populations have bounced back considerably. Do you know if there's any thought or work underway? I imagine this would be at DEC to delist that or other species.
I am not aware, but I know Aura's regs, essentially, if you look at uniform standards and conditions, we reserve that option that if any species is delisted, we no longer are going to require potentially down the road certain conditions. So at this point, no, I don't have any information about it.
Okay. And here's one. Have you in your work at ORES, are there particular misconceptions about the process that keep coming up that you would like to take this opportunity to respond to? I know that's a pretty general question, but it's a new process, and anything that goes through the legislature, there's breeds sort of different ideas about how it works before it actually becomes a law. Is there anything about the process that you would like to tell the people participating now that you think it would be especially important for New Yorkers to know about it?
That's a loaded question, and I can probably speak about that for another 8 hours or so, but I just say one thing, and that's just I certainly welcome feedback, and I certainly welcome criticism on ORA's, either the 94C process, regulations, office, you name it. But at the end of the day, we have to criticize based on a decision that office has made, and not try to predict a situation that has not occurred yet for ORAS. And I understand that everyone is very interested in learning ORA's decisions on and positions on various issues, and of course we have we have had the precedents right now in New York State since 1970. But reality of this is just give us more time. I'm gonna ask everyone, please be patient with us, and then certainly you are more than welcome to criticize myself, you criticize the office, criticize the process based on our decisions, not just based on hypothetical and based on assumptions that they, right now today, have not occurred.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know how it makes you feel, Hutan, that you're in a job that so many people are watching so closely.
Yeah.
Really interested to see, not just me, but lots of ACE members of the public, people in towns and counties, how this all plays out. But we are so glad that you're there, that you're willing to do this work, that you took this on, that the regulations got out in under a year, that you issued the first 2 permits, that the regulations thus far withstood a legal challenge. And so we're really hoping that this goes well. Our member companies are developing wind and solar projects in lots of different places. And they know that when they come to New York, or if they have any experience in New York, they know it's a place where these projects get a very hard look, that they go through the avoid, minimize, mitigate framework, that they have to be extra responsible about cultural resources, historical resources, environmental and natural resources too. But even in that framework, if it can be done in a way that's efficient and sensible. I think that's what your office is taking on. So we do really appreciate not only that you took the time to talk to us today, but also that you're, really striving for an efficient and comprehensive process there at the new Office of Renewable Energy Siting. And so thank you for that. Thank you for speaking with us today. That's all the questions that we had. So you're off the hot seat.
So just once again, I want to thank you and ACE New York and all your members for the opportunity to speak with you all today. It's my pleasure always I hope like not in a formal setting like this, to get feedback, and I appreciate feedback and criticism and like really like how we are doing and how we can improve things. Like that's at the end of the day, we are not done streamlining the process. We are not done improving this process. Like we always want to learn how we can get things done in a more efficient manner. And I really look forward to our continued partnership with ACE New York and all your members moving forward. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care, Hutan.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. We are closing remarks. I don't even have any remarks to make. Well, actually, one of the most important things I need to do is some thank yous. And I thank all of our speakers and our panelists and our introducers. I thank New Yorkers for Clean Power for all their work all year long. I also want to thank the team here at ACE New York, which includes Deb Peck-Kelleher, who's our Director of Policy and covers all legislative affairs. Megan Ligori, who is our business manager, but has been absolutely instrumental in making sure that this conference went smoothly. I want to thank Kathleen Gasparini, who is our Director of Communications and Marketing, and Kyle Rabin, who's our Director of Membership and also a really important and helpful analyst on large-scale renewables. We also have consultants here at ACE New York that many of you work with frequently. That's Mark Reeder and Raj Adapalli, who cover our ISO issues, and our lobbyist, Christine Tramontano at Malkin and Ross, and Jeff Jones, who is our communications consultant. Also want to thank the team at the Offshore Wind Alliance, which is part of ACE New York, Joe Martens, who has recently left ACE, but was really instrumental all year round in making sure the New York Offshore Wind Alliance operated smoothly and was very effective. We really thank him for his service here at ACE, and we will miss him a lot. But we will be able to announce a new director of the Offshore Wind Alliance soon. And so it's good to know that that campaign will be able to carry on uninterrupted. I also want to thank our sponsors, and you can put our sponsors online here. It is the members of ACE New York that do lots of the work in terms of telling us what they need, what will help the renewable energy industry, deciding what we work on, deciding what our priorities are. And for the next few weeks, that's exactly what ACE will spend our time doing. After the conference, we enter into a period of planning our priorities for the coming calendar year. What do our members need? What do we need to work on? And we heard a lot of those things today during this conference. We need some specific new policies to encourage the adoption of electric vehicles. We need to have new transmission investments, both for offshore wind and upstate renewables, so that the clean energy that these projects produce never get curtailed, can overcome congestion, can get to the places in New York where that power is needed. We also need fair and supportive rules for renewables and storage at the ISO. And so we are there in one way or the other nearly every day, attending meetings at the ISO and fighting for the policies that our member companies need to get their projects interconnected, hopefully in a timely manner, and eventually to get those projects operating and producing clean power for New York's clean energy transition. There's going to be a lot of things for us all to watch in the coming months and in the coming year. And one of those things I want to highlight is what Doreen Harris spoke about, which is the draft scoping plan of the Climate Action Council. The Climate Action Council has logged hours and hours and hours of work over the last year, not just the members of the council, such as myself. That's absolutely the least of it. It's the members of the technical advisory panels and the state staff that have been putting this draft plan together. During today's conference, I got an email that the first complete draft of the scoping plan is going to be available to the council meetings in the coming days. So we are getting close to having a comprehensive plan for us all to look at and critique and tear apart and augment and strengthen throughout 2022. So this might be a level of detail that the member companies of ACE who work in many, many states won't have time to delve into. But it's actually going to be an important blueprint for how we get from here to where we need to be in the future. And building renewables is absolutely the foundation of that plan, on which, in my view, everything else depends. But there's all sorts of other, as Doreen pointed out, hundreds of recommendations to deploy electric school buses and charging and electric transit and electric buildings and building decarbonization and building envelope improvements. And there's going to be a lot of individual policies that are recommended in that plan that are going to need help to become a reality. It is, at the end of the day, just a plan. And so many of those are going to have to be those recommendations are going to have to be turned into bills that we will advocate for here at ACE New York, along with many of you, both our private companies that are members of ACE and the environmental organizations that we work with in coalition all year long. So something to keep an eye out for, and absolutely something that will shape what the ACE team spends our time doing in the coming weeks and all through next year. So that brings us to the end of our conference. I want to thank again the ACE team, our presenters, also our new friends at VHB who are helping run the conference. They're not on screen, they're not on audio, but they are keeping things moving, and we really appreciate it. Coincidentally, also a member of ACE New York. I didn't even know VHB did this until we were looking for someone, and it turned out to be an ACE member because they also work in the renewable energy space quite extensively. So thanks to VHB as well. And don't hesitate to call us. You know how to find us. On this slide, it says thank you and see you next year, but I sincerely hope that we see many of you before next year's conference, which I really hope will be in person, but that we work with you and see you throughout the year. Thank you so much.